Oh, great. There we go. Yeah, so welcome. My name is Patience Andrew. I'm the Executive Director at the Custodians of African Literature. We love to call it COAL for short. And I remember recently someone was asking, so COAL, where do you mine the coal and all? But we just like to keep it short. And it's really such a pleasure to meet you. And thanks everyone for joining us this morning to learn a little bit more about the information session on the Grassroots Accelerated Education Micro Grant. Just before we get to it, I'll just share some ground rules, just so we're all on the same page as we start the session this morning. So please, I will advise that we all have our mics on mute, just so because we don't want to sound disruptive while, team members might be going through a presentation. And so everyone else who's on the call is able to hear and follow through the presentation that will be given out this morning. And then please, as much as possible, we'll encourage everyone to utilize the chat section, drop a comment, a question, or anything that you want to share while the session is going on. In between sections, we're going to take a pause and allow team members or people who are joining us on the call this morning for you to have the opportunity to ask any questions that you have for clarification. And then at the end of all the presentations, we're also going to open up the floor for questions directly where people can either by the raise of hands, utilize the Zoom icons to ask your questions or make your comment, just so we're able to cover every question and every, anything that you need clarification on. So we'll give enough time and room for that to happen at today's session. And we really like to meet everyone who has joined us this morning. So you're going to utilize the chat section on the call and just tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe tell us your name, your organization, and a fun fact about you. And I see that we're about 21 on the call, so we might not be able to have everyone, unmute themselves and go through it. But I'll be reading out what people put down in the comment section, just so, we're all carried along as we go through the session this morning. Just to kind of give you a walkthrough of what the session will look like this morning. We just finished the warm-up question and, the introduction. We're now going to go quickly into introducing a little bit about COAL. We'll tell you a bit more about the micro grant itself, the application stages. We'll do a deep dive into the proposal templates and application form, just so you get an understanding of what the expectation is. And then we'll definitely have a time for Q&A at the end of the day. But like I did say, as we go through each of the presentation, please, if you have any comments or questions that come to mind as we're going through these, do well to drop it in the chat section. I will definitely come back to it. And just to tell you a little bit more about who we are as an organization, why the micro grants, in case this is the first time you're hearing about COAL, we're coal, but not coal that, we're not mining coal. The full name is Custodians of African Literature. And basically at COAL, we really believe in local solutions driven by local skills and ideas, because we believe that strongly one of the ethos of why we exist and as an organization is the belief that African can solve Africans' problems, right? And we don't need external solutions to solve our problems. If we look at the most developed countries in the world today, they, were people who built their nations by themselves. And we need to start, subscribing to that, thinking to that, ideology, because again, even with like grant funding and fundraising for development initiatives, oftentimes we tend to think external, we tend to think foreign when we hear that. But it's really important that we begin to understand that there are skills, there are resources that are worth harnessing locally to solve local problems. And I think that's like the really bedrock of, why this grant even and why we exist as an organization, to be able to support children and young people to be able to thrive and contribute meaningfully to society. And we believe in investing early and locally. Early in the sense that, as I will come to tell you a little bit just in a moment, is the fact that we really want to focus, on early childhood education, because we believe just being able to read and write, just having that basic skills can really set up a young person for success in life. And that's why we're doing this, right? So we believe in investing early and locally, because again, we believe that young people and people within our communities and society can definitely solve our problems that we have or face in Nigeria and Africa at large. We have three main portfolios. The first is education. We have the youth development portfolio as well as the advocacy portfolio. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the sectors where we work just in a bit. So in education, like I said, we mostly support initiatives that have a strong emphasis or vision for early childhood education, which you get to hear a little bit more while we go through the grant process and about the grants this morning. And then there's a youth development through creative arts, right? So we don't do arts for art's sake. We do art as a tool for social change. So we harness literary, spoken word, visual, performance arts to be able to build life skills for young people, to build their confidence, their leadership skills, and to ensure that, again, through their art, they are meaningfully contributing to society, but they are also being able to sustain their livelihoods, by through the creative arts. And if you know, the creative arts sector is one of the underfunded sector. Artists tend to struggle a lot, but we want to be able to ensure that we're supporting young people in the creative arts as much as possible to be able to make a meaningful living from the work that they do. And how we do this, really, we have a bookstore which basically promotes African literature. And then we also work with young creatives, especially in practice stage, really to build their skills in the creative sector and really utilize those skills to be able to make a living at the end of the day. And then the third sector where we work is around like social justice driven through advocacy. So supporting community and youth-led, again, driven advocacy campaigns that promotes inclusion, equity, and challenges systemic inequalities. And this is something we do across Africa, and we always will allow that young people drive those advocacy because their voices needs to be heard. They need to be actively involved in changes and solutions that definitely impact their society. So this is just a summary of like the sectors where we currently work. And in case anyone has any questions and you want to learn a little bit more, please, our website is there. You have more information there, and then we can answer any questions that you might have today. All right, so I'm going to take a pause and stop talking because I know you're probably tired of listening to my voice, and now pass on to my colleague, Segun, who will tell us a little bit more about the micro grant itself, what the expectation is. And I know this is where we'll probably have more questions, but please do well to take note of those questions and we'll come back to respond to them. Yeah, over to you, Segun.
Thank you, Patience. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to introduce the fund. That's a Grassroots Accelerated Education Fund, and share the art behind what we do. I'll just quickly run through the slide and give room for more questions. At the core of what Co do, I think we launched the first pilot phase last year. I think between the mid of last 2024 till the project came to an end in December. Co believe that locally rooted solutions are key to closing learning gaps, especially for vulnerable and marginalized children. The fund is citizen-led, and by that we mean we trust the power of community educators and the people closest to the children to design the most relevant and impactful solutions. And to further explain that, that would mean Patience started by saying that African can really solve African problem. And in African trying to solve African problem, Co believe that it is the people living in those communities that can understand what the pain points are. I remember when we were children and we were reading books around snow, around storybooks around snow, around roses and all of that. And those things are not obtainable in our environment, except we see them in movies. They don't really make much sense. But if those curriculum have been designed to interpret our world and use where apples or where plants that we don't have have been exchanged for a mango, a orange, that the child can relate to, a potato in the case of a a plateau child, to say if you add two potatoes, another two potatoes, that will give you four in numeracy and all of that. So that level of context is what Co believe in. And yet, too often, this grassroots effort doesn't have access to the funding, the tools, and the support they need. So what we're saying is that these local players oftentimes don't have the skills they need, the funding they need, the capability they need to be better educators, better support, and solve the local problem. And that's where COAL is coming in. And through this fund, we're investing local. As I said, we believe citizen-led actors, local people trying to solve local problem, and we understand there's a gap that these local players don't have enough resources. They understand the problem, but they don't have the resources, the capability, the know-how to solve the problem. And Cole believe that if we invest locally, we're able to raise the capability of these citizen-aid actors, and that way Nigeria become a better place. As I started off, I said we launched the first pilot phase last year, and we saw about 125 kids got enrolled in the project. And out of the 125 kids, we had 13 enrolled in formal school. Some of the problem that have been with historical data and record we have as it that more than 60% of children in school, even though in school, are not able to read, especially the case in Nigeria. We agree we have a large out of school kids, but a good number of our kids are not able to read or solve basic numeracy. So that's the problem COAL is trying to solve at the local level. So our accelerated learning seek to bridge that learning gap and also see how much we can get the out of school children back into school. And that's what we've done in the pilot phase. We had 125 kids on board in the project, and 13 of those children enrolled in formal school. And this was possible with the couple of citizen actors we worked with in that phase. And we didn't we're not just interested about short-term wins. No, we're committed to long-term support and collaboration. That's why a lot of our project doesn't just talk with money and just give you funding and go and sit down. No, we want to ensure that we understand that there's a skill gap. We want to be able to build your skill. We want to be able to we provide training platform, we provide resources so that it's an holistic approach from resources you need to for money you need to carry out the project, to the trainings and the mentorship that is required to get the result out at the levels with which we support from. Next slide, please, Patience. Yeah, and what are we looking for? What are the kind of projects we support, and what would a winning application look like? First, we want the project that will be delivered to be strong in foundational literacy and numeracy skills. As I said, we launched the pilot phase last year. And what that means is that we had a lot of learnings from that project. We saw the shortcomings, we saw the successes, we saw the things that need to be tweaked. And one thing that we felt that need to be tweaked in this phase would be ensuring that there's a strong foundational learning taking place, right? We want the project that will be funding this year to really focus on that, right? To ensure that the curriculum that is used, we understand that there's a lot of, I think a lot of schools use it around in Jos or in Plateau State. They call it Montessori curriculum, which has a lot to do with British education system, but that doesn't sell, the government doesn't recognize that. But what that does is that a mix of a Montessori and a local Nigerian curriculum, a mix of that help the child have a reinforced learning, right? The children just don't learn numeracy, for instance, right? Learn how to do 1+1 and cram it the way we've always done with the Nigerian curriculum that has not been changed yet. But with Montessori, it allows them to understand why is 1+1 2. So we want those kind of we're not prescribing any at this point, but we want anybody applying to be able to give us foundational learning curriculum that try to reinforce numeracy and literary skill, ability for the children to be able to read and write. Like in the last phase, we had some of our partners doing more of phonics, right? Helping the children learn how to pronounce words. They can learn how to pronounce words. It's easier for them to be able to join words together and form sentences and all of that. So we want something very robust around the learning experience of those kids. The second priority would be this should be child-centered learning. right? By child-centered learning, we mean approaches that are experiential for the kids, play-based, and multisensory. We all know children have very short attention span, right? So we don't just want a nominal classroom. They just sit and learn 2, 3 hours and go back home and all of that, but something that triggers learning along all their motor skills, right? That gives them that experience that they wouldn't forget, and also ignite the passion for wanting to school further, right? And making them want to love school and the likes, right? So that's what we are seeking as well. Then our third requirement would be that we want a project that will foster community and parent engagement. That's one unique gains we had in our pilot phase. We had multi-level um, parents and community engagement from the local players and the local communities. Then I think when we're closing out the year, we had we had a state level engagement session. And what that does is it allows us to understand what the problem is. It allows us know what are we doing right. And as you said, we don't believe we're savior. We don't come with savior mentality. We don't believe in handout. We want to be able to get the people to solve the problem, be able to talk the problem because they understand the problem, right? And it's in those sessions you get to understand what the nuances are, right? What the nuances are, what the complaints are. We had one of those sessions in some of the communities, we had mothers committing themselves to be able to get their children to ready for school. They will go out of their way, out of the inconvenience, and make these sacrifices for their kids and all of that. So that is the kind of partnership we want. We understand the communities may not have money, they may not have the know-how, but they have something they can do. Make home conducive for the child to read, to learn, right? The community could say, we ensure that there's security, we ensure that the Emrangwa can come and say, between this time and this time, every family must ensure that their children go to school, right? Attend these sessions or attend this learning center. So that is the level of participatory engagement we want and we're seeking in the project. Now, we're also looking for a transitional education pathway. I mentioned in my previous slide that the last pilot phase, we had 125 kids in the project, and about 13 of that was transitioned into formal school, meaning we have 13 children who were never in school before, and they were able to be transitioned into formal school. We understand Nigeria is grappling with very huge number out of school kids, and the ones in school are also very faulty, but we can use one stone to kill two birds, the popular African adage, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. We didn't say your project have to target out of school kids. We're saying that as you're planning and writing and proposing your project, let it be that you also target a good portion, maybe 10%, maybe 2%, maybe 3% of your targeted children, right? Say I'm planning to support 100 kids now, and we're planning to have 100 kids in the center. At least 10% of that number should be children that are out of school, right? And the project should have a pathway to get them to school. And by schooling, we formal school, we don't mean it has to be a private school. It could be a government school, right? Like in the pilot phase, we had 10 of those kids were in public schools, another 3 were able to get into private school. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a private school. And by transitioning, it could be part of your project expense would be to provide school uniform, it could be to provide school books, it could be to even be that after the parent that agreed to send their child to school, it could be your responsibility to talk to the school principal and make sure that the child gets to school. It could be that you're providing meal to support, something just to make sure that we're also trying our effort to reduce the out of school children. Another key component of our project, or what we're looking for rather, would be a strong monitoring and evaluation. Strong monitoring and evaluation model must be in place. By that, we mean every aspect of your project. So from what I've said so far, we mean the project will have, we said there will be strong numeracy and literacy skill in place. There will be child-centered learning. There will be community and parent engagement. In all of these segments of your project or whatever application you're putting forward, right? along all of those segments, there should be a way to evaluate whether you are doing the right thing. That's why we're strong on evaluation here. To be able to know, are we making progress? So for instance, I'll go to the curriculum aspect, foundational literacy and numeracy skills. If the children are coming in, is there a pre-test to know, assess something to assess their level of understanding? What can they solve? What assessment did you give them to be able to segment them into classrooms, into pre-level, whatever class you want to put them, or whatever level of learning you want to put them? Is there an assessment? Is there a midterm assessment to be able to check, okay, this is 1 month into the project, are they really learning? Do we need to change our learning methods? Do we need to change the way we are teaching them and all of that? So that's what your monitoring and evaluation help you do. And your submission must show all of that, or should show all of that, to show how you intend to achieve a good foundational literacy and numeracy learnings being passed across to these kids, to show how are you assessing your child-centered teaching methods. So you should have a way to measure that, right? That's why we're strong on this aspect. Then finally, there should be sustainable and community ownership. By sustainability, we mean if this funding stops from COAL, right? Are you able to foster this project? Are you able to not abandon the kids? You've had 6 months, 1 year project with these kids. They've learned, they've made some progress. If your funding stop, we want to ensure that the project doesn't also stop, right? We want to ensure that the kids still continue through schooling and all of that. All right. Next slide, please, patient. Our eligibility criteria, the organizations must be legally registered. By legally registered, just the legalities thereabout, of course, registered with CAC, at least be active for 2 years and as a non-profit or a social enterprise. At this stage, we will not be funding for-profit organizations, but we're focusing on charity-based organizations or social enterprises, and must be in operation for 2 years. And some of the questions we often get from people asking is, we've been registered for 5 years, for instance, but our education project has been 6 months, right? By 6 months, that would mean you don't have enough experience. We feel if you've run education project for at least 2 years, you're able to show, you have experience, you know what is required. Managing kids can be very dicey and difficult, all right? So we want people with a bit of experience in managing children, and especially children in their numbers, be able to be responsible for their safeguarding and all of that. And that's why we're asking for at least an experience of 2 years, and of course, legally registered. Your initiative will be locally led, meaning people from the community, people that understand the community, people that understand what the problem are, and be able to engage the community, be able to engage the local government actors, the education authority within the local government, and all of that. We're also looking at a clear implementation plan, right? So there should be timelines. As I said, we listed some of the key criteria in my previous slide, but also there should be clear implementation plan covering your timelines, your budget, your outcome. Your strong safeguarding policies must be in place. You must have a strong monitoring and learning framework, which I have touched on earlier. So what don't we fund? COAL won't fund. As I said, first of all, you have to be legally registered, and we don't fund for-profit entities, not because they did anything wrong. It's just that we're looking at organizations who are engrossed in their communities. By engrossing their community, I want to solve local problems without having making profit from it. That's what we're seeking, all right, at this stage, maybe later in the future. The organization with no track record in education and nutrition, as I said, you could have been registered for 5 years, 10 years, but you don't play within this education sector. You don't manage children. You don't treat children. You don't train them, right? There's a whole bit of dynamics to that fact. So we want people with at least 2 years of experience. Education organization without implementing capacity in Plateau State. Now, your organization can be, say, registered in Bauchi, or registered in Benue, or registered in Nasarawa, or registered in Abuja, right? And you operate in Abuja, but you have capacity to be able to have implement a project in Plateau. because this project is focused on Plateau, right? So even though you are not based in Plateau, but you have the capacity, you have the network, you feel you have the capacity, you have the capability and resources to be able to manage a project in Plateau, you're welcome. But if you're not operating in Plateau at all, you don't have the resources to manage in Plateau, we wouldn't be expecting you to apply as well. Now, we are also very big in call on accountability. We believe every dime, because we are training kids here, right? We should be able to show them the value. We're not just teaching them academics. We want to teach them life value, life lessons, what could make our society better. So we're very big on accountability. So we want to see that the organization have basic financial system in place for check and balances, something to show either an audited account, a published account, because we want to be able to track every expense, that expenses, money are used for what they are supposed to be used for. We don't fund partisan or political groups. We don't fund unstructured or based project, right? So that then eligibility expenses, eligible expenses rather. So by eligible expenses, I mean, if you send, because part of this application, you would have the budget section, which we expect you to forward along with your application. And that's what this section is for. If you had come across the ad for the project, we said this segment, organization could get up to 2 million, up to 2 million in funding. So as a maximum of 2 million for funding for this project, and that we want to look at direct costs of project. All right, that's what Cole is readily interested in. All right, so by direct cost of project, that would mean that project that goes into the direct implementation funding, expenses that go into the direct implementation of the project. By that, I mean, so your facilitators or your teachers or your volunteers, right? There should be funding going directly into that, maybe paying off volunteer stipend, maybe buying of education, training aid, maybe giving meals to the kids. So those are things that directly implement project. Now, Cole wouldn't fund your operational expense because we believe we're only funding a project. We're not funding your existing organization. We're funding your project. So project costs that relate to the project, which I will tag as direct cost, and that's what we want to fund. Volunteer costs and related stipend, as I've mentioned that already. Meals for the learners, we're happy to fund that. Stationery and learning needs, we're able to fund that. Communication and impact and insight. So for instance, say you're having a community engagement and you need to capture that in camera. You want to have that recorded, right? So you want to have a videographer come around to take pictures, to video, and maybe probably interview the participants. That we're happy to fund because it's actually relate to the project. Then evaluation costs, the costs of, so the possibility that part of your evaluation model, which I said we're big on, is that you want to get a third party to help you evaluate, people that can do that better, that experience in that. I need to pay them for that. We're able to fund that as well. So I will be passing this next segment over back to patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Shegun. Time is just to walk you quickly through the grant stages. So in terms of, I'm sure you probably would have seen these in the guidelines that we shared with you on our website. So of course, the grants will be open from 14th to the 16th of May for initiative and organizations to put in an application. And then we will begin our panel review from the 17th to the 31st of May. And usually our panel review is done by members from our board and a few team members. And in some cases, we might bring in other experts, to join in the review of the application, just so it is fair, it is transparent, and then not one person is reviewing all the applications that we get or receive. So that will happen between the 17th to the 31st of May. And then from the 2nd to the 14th of June, after the review, we'll shortlist the candidates. And then for those shortlisted, we're going to have interviews if there's a need. It's not in all cases that we want to interview people that are shortlisted, but if there are like gaps, or if we have like any more questions that we need, to engage further on, we then get to do that. Then Shagun, I think I've made you a co-host, so you can look at the people who are in the waiting room and ensure that the person who was posting the rubbish, is not added into the meeting again, just so other people who are trying to join the meeting are able to do that. Just please take note of the chat section and people who are trying to join. And then we were going to announce the successful applicants by the 19th of June. And then by the 27th of June, by this time, we should have completed. So every organization selected will need to sign a contract stating all the terms of the grant itself. And so we have everything documented in an agreement that both parties agree to before the project starts. And by the start of July 2025, projects will start. And then by this time, the first milestone disbursement of the funds will be sent to the organization's bank accounts. And because we did say that it's not just the grants, we also work with partners to build capacities in areas where there are gaps. So that will begin from September 2025. And this is open to both organizations that are successful and those who are not. So if you have team members within your organization and you feel like some of those areas where we'll be touching or building capacity around, because we work with other international development experts to lead these trainings and these sessions, please do feel free to sign up for those when it's time. And you'll be notified for around when we're close to the time for these. And I think we've touched on these a couple of times, and I think it's just kind of reiterating why we do this, just so partners understand the why behind, this particular initiative. But we have certain ethos that guide our work. Local first, I think you've heard local right from the beginning of this meeting, that yes, we really want to be rooted in local communities and ensuring that people in those communities are the ones driving this initiative and not someone external. And then hand up, not handout. Again, Shagun has touched on this. Is not a handout, right? The truth is the grant is very micro. It's very micro, because sometimes when you think about the amount, even it's like, what can these do? And that's why Shagun was emphasizing that the funding, can really go to support like stationery, learning aids that you use for the children, and other project-related costs. But of course, it might not be able to pay staff. So we believe that you have other initiative within your organization that helps you to support, staff members working on this particular project. But the whole idea is to support the direct implementation of your project, right? And it's a micro grant. And as you know, like you, we are also a grassroots organization. And like you, we're rooted in Nigeria. We have sourced these funds locally, right? To be able to support this initiative. So as much as it's a micro grant and really small, the whole idea is that you're able to utilize this small fund to be able to support your education project. And then access and equity is also one of the ethos, because like Shagun did say at the beginning, we have grassroots initiative really doing phenomenal work. And I've worked in the international development sector for over 7 years. And I'll tell you that some of the impact that these smaller initiatives achieve, right, in comparison to big INGOs that get the dollars in millions, right? It's not comparable with the level of change that some of the smaller organizations, are able to impact in their communities when you compare some of the impact that we see at the grassroots in comparison with big INGOs, with international funding and what they do. It's not commensurate. Yes, they have the big funding, they have the large resources to be able to hire skilled staff and all of that. But yeah, I think I've made my point on that. I'm just saying that we see this initiative, we recognize their impact in the communities, and we just want to support and work with them, right? It's not a handout. We want to be collaborators. The last phase that we worked on, we worked with our partners, and then we were doing everything together, basically, right? So they were not seen as grantees. We're all partners implementing the project. And creativity is also at the core of what we do at CORE. So we ensure that as you do this initiative, that you're, adopting other creative ways of ensuring that learning is made possible for the children that you're supporting. And then partnership, again, is at the core. Child-centeredness, Shagun has already touched on this, so I won't dwell so much on that, but just wanted to share some of the ethos that guide our work. And I think this is a very good place to take a pause and here if anyone has any questions. Yeah, please just let us know before we move on, because I know it's a lot of talking that has been happening, and then we can then go through the application, the proposal templates, as well as the application form, and just quickly walk through those. If people have any questions, just so you're armed with the information and knowledge that you need to put in an application. But I will pause here for any questions and try to see if we can take out the security from the chat. Hopefully all that works well and people are able to also lift their hands and ask their questions. But I'll pause here if we have any questions.
Hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity and the great work you are doing. Just a quick one. During the last application cycle, I remembered when we scaled through to move to the next phase, one of the requirements with regards to the budget was for us to make provisions of, I think, past records, I think financial records of maybe projects we've had. So I really don't know if it was that my team and I were not cleared on that. I think one of the issues we had that we got stuck, we could have possibly sent a mail to ask for clarification with regards to that during the course of the application. So I would love to know, is it that we had to make those statements, yeah, maybe financial statement or records for past projects known to the organization, to call when the application cycle is on. That's one. My last question is there really a form of streamline with regards to the local government of intervention? Is it going to be something that would have an influence on the decision with regards to the team at which the project will be handed over to? So I would want to know if when you have a project already working within a people group, within a community, and you feel that COAL, the support from COAL would also further enhance or will get to instigate the response of the children to learning. So is it welcomed? So I just want to have an idea about that. Thank you.
Thanks. Shegun, do you want to answer the?
All right. All right, thanks for those questions. It's good to know that you were up last year. And all right, I'll just touch on the questions and I'll try to repeat them to be sure I understand the question very well. The first one was around the budget. You say you scale to the next phase and you were requested to provide budget. I touched on that earlier when I was speaking. I did say that you will be required to provide audited accounts. That's our first go-to, right? So I would want to see a audited account of your activity and probably backing up with a bank statement, right? So anybody can have prepared the audited accounts. They are not being prepared by, as long as it's not being prepared by the big fours. You know who the big fours are, right? The PwCs of this world, the Deloitte, the Akintola Williams. As long as you're not the one preparing your audited account, it would be good to have that backed up with the bank statement, right? So I could track the expenses, right? We could check through and track the expenses. The reason for that is because anybody can say they've done education project and this is what it looked like, right? But you go through, like from my experience we had last year, you go through the bank statement and it doesn't match, right? It doesn't correlate to say there was anything on education going on. I know Nigerians were big on cash, but unfortunately, we don't have a way of measuring that. The only tool we have is what we're trying to make use of, and we try to be very contextual as much as possible. And the only way we can do that is through bank statements. So the bank statement allows us to check, match the audited account you submit, match that along with your bank statement, and also match that with what you said in your application. So say I said that previously we've done this project that's oversee 50 kids. We did this, we provide school meal, we did that. And I look at the period, I check the bank statements, there's nothing matching. So that's already difficult for me. And because of the number of applications you have, you don't have the time to go back to everyone and be asking detailed questions and trying to get detailed feedback. So that's why we try to do sessions like this to make it very clear as possible. Put yourself in our shoe, like you're getting application for people you don't really know, and the only way you can know them and understand what they do is by what they submit. So try to be clear as much as possible. Try to give as much information as possible and make sure that the informations are acquired accurate. Then the second question, can you say that again, please? I don't miss it.
Okay. So on the second question, I was asking on location bound with regards to the project. But before you go into that, please let me just comment on that. Now, there are times in which we've had, like we've been operating for more than 5 years, and one of the difficulties we had for a while, like 2 years straight, with the bank was this SCUMEL. The SCUMEL situation was so intense that we've complained over time that we are pending for a very long time from SCUMEL. And it's quite frustrating how that there was a time that restrictions was on the account. So most of the projects, which were major projects we're doing then, was basically working on getting to have the addition on a personal account and all of those things. So, but for recent project, which was maybe withdrawal from the account, you have titles like projects, you have titles like, so, part of the upcoming, like I said, thank God for grants like this. It gives us an idea of what is expected of us. Because most times, truth be told, you have us writing, maybe the title will just be, or the description will just be project, and it won't be more detailed about this is what we intend to. So sometimes it's a limiting factor, and that is why we were stuck as our last day. But I think I have clarity to that now. So I would like to know on the location bound. So do we have any form of sensitivity with regards to location bounds that will influence the decision of the board?
Okay, so as long as it's Plateau State, we are not specific on what local government. As long as it's Plateau State, it can be Kanke, it can be Kwampan. I'm mentioning those now because I know they are very far away from Jos, right? It can be in Kanke, it can be in Kwampan, it can be anywhere, as long as it's Plateau State. Focus is Plateau State. It can be Jos North, it can be anywhere.
Yeah, Shagun, can I just quickly add something before we come to Okedara Sunday on the financials? As long as you're transparent and clear, right? And provide enough information with your context and all, I think that's totally fine. It just needs to be very clear. Even if we're using a personal account, the personal account, narration in terms of your inflow and outflow should be clear that if I pick it up, I shouldn't have guesses. I remember some organizations that were disqualified last year was because you're doing phenomenal work, but monies go through personal accounts and there's no clear narration even for what those monies are for. So as much as possible, it does make sense at least to sort out the SCUMEL issue. I understand there are challenges with the SCUMEL and all, but to ensure that, you get that sorted out, because like you did say, and I love the fact that you mentioned that, is this is really small, right? It's really preparing you for something bigger, because you can't access international funding if you don't have those systems and processes in place. So as much as possible, we need to be more structured. And this whole idea that you keep hearing in the international development space saying, the Global South organizations are not skilled, they're not experienced, there's skill gap. I think it's time to kind of really go away from that, because we need to grow, right? To be able to access those bigger funds and ensure that we have the right systems and processes and stop that negative narrative that's ongoing within the space. Sunday, sorry, I know your hand has been up for so long. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, man.
Morning.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. My name is Comrade Okedara Sunday Rotimi. Student leader, activist, and at the same time, I'm a campaigner and advocate. So this will be my first time of hearing about CoNG. It's one of my comrades that called my attention to it few days ago that I registered to participate for this section. Honestly, I'm highly impressed with what you are preaching. Thank you so much for imparting in Nigeria, especially the younger generation, whereby we expect that they are the hope for this our nation. Thank you so much, man. My question goes just simple and straight, because this will be my first time. I personally, I don't have any organization beyond my student unionism platform that we are using. And we are also, I and some of my co-comrades, we are also do one or two things. Like last week, one of my comrades in Kano did a program for Almajiri here in Ungogo local government, and is the little we can organize among ourselves we are doing. But I want to know, maybe co-NG also partner with student organization, because for me now, I'm National Director of Planning and Innovation for National Association of University Students, national headquarters, whereby we have a comrade across all the 36 states in Nigeria. So I don't know, maybe there is a chance for student association also to be part of this initiative. That's what I want to ask, ma. Thank you so much.
Shagun.
All right. Thanks. I don't know to call you Sunday or Rotimi. All right. Thanks for your question, and commendable work you guys are doing from the student side of things. We're all one student as well, and I understand where we're coming from. We are cool. We understand. We can. Nigeria is grappled with a lot of problems. We want to solve all, but beyond money, we don't have the capacity, the training, the experience. So we try to focus on what we understand, and this is what we understand right now, and that's what we're focusing on now. So in this interim stage of our project, and what this OGAF is about, that's the Grassroots Accelerated Education Fund. It just targets the criteria we've listed, which is the organization must be registered, must have at least legally registered in Nigeria for the past 2 years, must have experience already working with evidence to prove in the education sector, and every other criteria we've listed. At this interim stage, that is what the focus is on, right? What I would advise for organization like yours, or from a student arm like yours, would be you can identify local education community-based solution, like the ones we fund, and try to work with them. You could give your expertise as your experience. A lot of people in university can go teach, depending on your skill and your studies. Maybe your mathematics base, and go teach arithmetic for free, and contribute more like volunteering based kind of support. You could help them with their accounting books. You can help them with anything that just contribute to their work. That would be another way to support. But from Cole's point of view, we are not able to fund students projects at this stage. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, sir, you answer it. What I'm trying to say is that, can we also be part of executor of the project? That's what I'm also asking. That are we eligible to register to also execute one or two projects under the co?
Yeah, as I said, if you meet the criteria of a legally registered organization and it's been existing for the past 2 years, right? If you're registering now, you won't meet that criteria. But if you had an organization, register prior, and you have experience working in the sector for at least 2 years, 2 years experience working with kids, then why not? We don't mind because you're a student or you're not a student. That's not the problem. All right. But once you meet the criteria, which we've listed already,
Yeah,
who is
and
happy to fund? Yeah.
it could be a consortium, right? It doesn't have to be you directly applying. You could join hands with another, maybe an established NGO entity, right? And form a consortium. But again, you need to look at the grant size. It's very small. That's if you're not legally registered, if that makes sense. So yeah, just wanted to add that. Vivian. we'll take Vivian and then quickly look at the templates because of time. So, we don't keep people waiting.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. So my name is Vivian. I'm a school administrator. So I raised my hand just to get clarification. But before that, I'm a digital professional teacher. I've been teaching for more than 10 years. I'm a STEM educator, a spelling bee supervisor. So I'll use a personal experience of mine, to just explain further. There was a point in my life, I have 4 kids. There was a point in my life that I couldn't afford to pay for my children's fee as a teacher because of some issues. So I started homeschooling my children. And then I thought about parents who are in my shoes, who at some point in their life, they were able to afford, some luxurious lifestyle, and due to some issues, they couldn't school their children anymore. And I thought to myself, I had the opportunity of being a teacher, and I had the opportunity of homeschooling my children because I had to go to schools, get curriculum, do a lot of things. Then I thought, okay, how do I help other parents like me who at some point in their lives, they couldn't, afford to send their children to school, to offer them same quality education at a very, very affordable rate or subsidized rate. Because the locality where I find myself, there's actually no government presence here. Before you can get to the local health center, it's really far. There's no primary school, there's no secondary school, government owned. Basically the whole area. So because of this, there's a lot of private schools around. And most of these schools are really expensive. Before you can enroll a child, you'll be spending close to 200,000 just for one child. Now imagine a parent who has 4 children and has little or no income, or just has something to just get by. How do they educate their children? This was what prompted me. I had registered, I always had a dream of owning a school. So I had registered before now in 2019. I also started the state government registration that period, but I really couldn't start up. What I did, I started, from my home. We're over 5 years now. I started from my home, and that was how I was able to achieve some of the goals I have achieved. And along the line, I have met parents who are probably not able to pay. We still have to discount for them. Most of the time, I engage in online teaching so they can meet up paying my teachers and all that. So this was what prompted me, to look for grants so that we can see how we can equip ourselves better, to help children to learn better. Now, because I'm a private school owner and I belong to the Private School Association, I hope I'm still eligible because we are charity-based. Yes, to an extent. Most times we give discounts, and I can tell you as low, the school fee is very, very affordable. Even with that, we get to give a lot of discounts. Most of this fee we collect is basically to pay teachers, because you actually need good teachers to impact these children, and you can't pay peanuts to people who you want to impact in children, and you get 100% you want. So most of the fee we collect is just for us to be able to pay our teachers and retain the space where we run the school business. So I don't know if I'm still eligible because I'm, a private, yeah.
All right. No, thanks for all the background. I think Shegun is more familiar with like the legal. Is your school registered as a social enterprise or is it private?
It's private.
Okay. Shegun is our expert in this area. What do you think?
All right. Thanks, Vivian, for the detailed question on the background. All right, I'm going to try to answer this as much as I can without having to discourage you, Vivian. For now, right, the scope of this project is targeting not private entities, either social nonprofits or incorporated trustees. By social nonprofit would be that it's not for profit. It's just like the way coal is. Coal is like a social nonprofit. So what we do is we offer services and we get paid for it. And the money, the proceeds we put back into what we do. So we don't take, none of the directors, none of the trustee members take earnings. None of like you had Patience say she's an executive director, she doesn't get paid and all of that. Everything we do is volunteer based and all free. So what I meant is that if you're registered as a private entity, your CAC documents say private, we will not be able to fund at this time, right? But I believe there are other ways we can collaborate, right? I would advise that you keep in touch, right? Maybe after this session, you could send us an email and we could see how we can work with you. And I love the fact that you said in your community or where you are, there isn't any public schools around. We've been onboarding a couple of organizations like that already, and we could see how we can work on another kind of project, but not on this one.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll definitely send a mail.
All right. Thank you.
Vivian, please, if
Hello.
there's any question, can you hold on to your question, please, so we can quickly go through the application templates and then we'll come back to questions. Is that okay? All right. So quickly, right? I just wanted us to go through the application. First of all, beyond everything that we've said in this meeting today, these application guidelines is very detailed. And I want to believe we've had a chance to look at it on the website. So please, in case you forget anything or you want to go back and read up again, the guidelines, this one that is very detailed is a good one to go to. I just wanted to mention that. But in terms of the proposal and what we're looking at to get out of it, let me just quickly check. Can everyone see my screen to be sure I'm sharing the right screen? Can you see the template?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. So I'll just quickly walk us through each part of the template and what the expectation is. In case you have any questions or comments, again, please do note them down. We'll come to them at the end. Initially, in the first phase, we had put out a form, but we noticed that with that particular form, it became a bit difficult to kind of articulate the project proposal in a logical way and in a way that makes sense. And we thought, yeah, maybe we should work with a proposal template this time around because it helps the person who is applying to articulate their project in a way that makes sense and, you know, in putting this forward. So that's why we have this template, which you then need to complete and then submit via a form, which I will come to later on. But the first section is just really understanding your problem, right? And in this section, I know the tendency is wanting to talk about how Nigeria has over 18 million out of school children and all those things that we usually see in proposal documents. As much as that is good, that shouldn't be the focus here. If you are working in, say, a community in Kanke, local government, LG, right, for instance, right? What is the exact problem in that community? Just like Vivian just shared now in terms of what was a challenge for her within her own community. Those contextual nuances or challenges is what we want to see in this section, right? Fine, if you want to talk about the stats in Nigeria, that's fine, but just make sure you're keeping it very brief to really talk about the actual problem that you want to solve. Education is broad. The problem or the challenges within the education sector is broad. What is your niche? What exactly is the problem that you're seeking to solve? So don't make it too general, right? Like anything anybody can just say and you know, that won't fly in this context. We want to know the location where you're working, what the exact problem is in that particular community where you intend to implement. So please try to articulate that under the problem statement. Then the project description, this is where you now tell us a bit more about what your solution is. You've articulated what the problem is within the community where you're working. Then the next thing is to be able to articulate what your solution is, right? Which here you just need to tell us what the project will achieve, what is the expected outcome from the solution that you're putting forward. Importantly, who are your target beneficiaries, right? And when we say target beneficiaries, you need to be able to articulate the age range of people that you're seeking to support, the peculiar challenges within that demography that you're seeking to support, right? Clearly articulate it, in the section under the project description and what your solution is to the problem that you've articulated, in the preceding section. And then project objective and outcomes. It is expected that for every objective, there should be an expected outcome. Sometimes it might be 2, 3, or even 4 expected outcomes to an objective. And let me give an example. Let's say objective 1, your objective 1 is, let me use a simpler one that we'll be able to understand, is to enroll, say for instance, by the end of the project, the 12-month period, one of your objectives is to enroll, say 50 out-of-school children in formal education, for instance, right? What is the expected outcome? Enrollment is not enough. That you enroll students in school is not enough, right? Beyond just enrolling, what do you want to see happen after they've been enrolled? So your expected outcome could be increase or improvement in literacy or in learning for those children who you've enrolled into school. Or an expected outcome could be that they're enrolled and they stay in school, throughout the primary level of education or whatever level it is that you're seeking to see an expected outcome in. So for every objective, you need to match it with an expected outcome. And please, feel free, your expected outcome and your objective can be 1 or 2, right? Feel free to delete any other thing. That you have this in the template doesn't mean you need to have an expected outcome that is up to 3. It's just based on what your project's focus is about that you need to put into the template. And then in terms of objective, right? And maybe this is like a mini training. It's expected that there are activities. So how it works is, activities should lead to outputs and outputs should lead to outcomes, but we'll come and discuss that a little bit more when we're looking at the logic model. But it's expected that for every objective, there are a series of activities you need to implement. So let's go back to the example I shared. Our objective is to enroll 50 children within 12 months as an example. What activities do we need to implement under this objective? Activity 1 could be that we recruit or select or identify those children in our communities who are not in school, right? That is an activity on its own. And the process that needs to go into selecting or identifying those kids is an activity. Activity 2 could be maybe stakeholder engagement with primary schools or private schools within your community, for example, right? So that could be like stakeholder or advocacy engagement with community or the schools that you intend to enroll these kids in, right? That could be another activity. Another activity could be maybe orientation with the parents of these children, an advocacy and orientation session that you want to, for these kids, because you can't just enroll them in school without engaging their parents, right? And that could be an activity, again, under that particular objective. But you know your project, you know the context, you're best suited to articulate what those activities are. And this makes it easier when you come to track impact of your project, to know how to track what activity is contributing to what objective is resulting into an outcome, what outputs are we seeing from those objectives. So it's really clear. So that needs to be articulated under each of these. And then importantly, by specialism, I'm a monitoring and evaluation and learning professional. So it means I love data. And it's not just about me, it's the fact that data drives everything now. Like this, you can't make any informed decision as an organization without data. You can't be able to see whether your children or the learners are actually learning if you're not tracking it, their learning and have systems in place to ensure that that is happening, which is like, that's an area we definitely wear our glasses to look at with partners we work, right? And I understand that sometimes there might be gaps or capacity gaps in this area, but that's why we're here to really support you to ensure that, 1, you're tracking the right data, you're analyzing the right data and reporting on the right data. So you need to tell us how you would monitor, evaluate, and learn from your projects, right? How will the data within your project be collected? How will they be analyzed? How would you draw learning or insights from this, from the data that you collect, to be able to track progress over time and with the learners that you're working with? And then it's also very important to be able to articulate all the activities. So your activities that you've articulated in the previous section, you don't come here, you need to, every project works within a timeline. So if you're working within a 6 months timeline, what are the respective activities that you will implement in your project? What are the timelines for when these activities will happen? This is important because we need to match your activities to your budget expenses, right? At the end of the day, to know that, oh, these activities are being implemented, and this is the budget allocation for the respective activity, so that we're mapping activity to budget, right? And so you're able to clearly track your budget expenses at the end of the day. And the timeline for when these activities will be. And these need to be high level. You don't need to be very detailed and explaining what the activities is. So activity 1 can just be, say, identification of students. And the whole idea for this project is that we believe that this project is already happening. It's not as if it's a new project, right? It's something you're already doing. The grant is only coming to support and augment what you're already doing. If you're thinking of bringing in other innovative ideas into it, and all of that. So it's not expected that this is an entirely new project, right? It's something you're already working on. So you already know what those activities are, the respective timelines for that. If you're adding new activities, just to ensure that it's captured in the template. And in terms of who is responsible, it's just basically identifying, is this the project manager who will be responsible for this? Is it something that is consulted out to a consultant? Again, you don't need to be too detailed, just, articulate who those individuals are in terms of their roles. You don't need to put a name of your staff there. It's more of roles, right? Project manager, external consultants, those kind of things. So we clearly know who is responsible for what. Then the budget summary, again, this is just to give us a sense of your expected budget for the project. So like Shegun did say, we will fund up to 2 million and maybe more, depending on the scope of your project. But please, only put, if your project only needs 1 million, just put what you need, right? If your project needs maybe 1.5 million in terms of where you need support or financial support in the project you're already running, right? Just state the amount. You don't have to state the exact, because we said up to 2 million, you now put up to 2 million when maybe you don't even need up to that for what you're seeking to achieve within your project. So just ensure that your expenses align with the need in terms of the financial need. And for some organizations, it might be too small. It might just be that this funding helps with a certain aspect of your project. And then you have other funding sources to support other things that you do, which we saw in our previous projects, right? So a part of our funding was used to support specific activities, whereas there were other activities happening on the side that was funded through something else, which is totally fine. You just need to be able to articulate for our own side of the funding, what exactly will be funded and what activities, and then adding those description there and the amount, because later on we will need to transfer this budget into a robust expense tracking budget sheet, right? That is clear, and we'll see what the amount is per, mapped to the respective activities. And then organizational capacity. This is a very important aspect or section of the proposal. Here is where we want to see, for you to demonstrate that you have the capacity and the track record or, to implement the project. And here we want to see key highlights, impact highlights of what you've done previously. If there are 1 or 2 projects you've implemented in the past, what are the outcomes or impacts from those projects? If you have a website, you have links to resources and things that you've done previously, this is where to really shine. And please don't hold back. Don't be too humble. Brag if you like, even brag about the success that you've achieved previously, because we want to see that you have the capacity to be able to do this. And then risk assessment. Every project has its risk. So it's good that as project managers or people who will be planning and implementing the project, that you begin to think about some possible risk on the project and some of the mitigative strategies that you put in place to ensure that, those risks are well managed. So you need to be able to articulate it within the context of where you work. A risk could be conflict, for instance, like we saw in one of the LGAs where we worked, where, we know Plateau State very well, right? Conflict can disrupt learning. That could be a challenge, right? So what's your mitigation strategy to ensure that, yes, there's conflict, but it doesn't hamper learning? And some of these things are out of our hands, really, right? Sometimes you don't even know when some of those risks might come in place, but it's good to start thinking early enough for when, possible things like that might happen and what your strategy will be to mitigate against those. And sustainability, very key. Project funding ends. We don't want project to end because funding has ended. So what is the plan post goals funding, right? The partners we worked with last year are still carrying on with their project. That's what we want to see. We don't want a situation whereby funding ends and then project also ends. No, because learning is continuous and it takes time, right, for a child to fully learn and know how to read and write. So a 6-month project will not solve it, right? It will only contribute. So we want to ensure that you want to be able to ensure that you clearly articulate what your sustainability plan is. Community ownership is very key. How do you intend to mobilize resources within your community to ensure that those projects continue, even if the funding ends? And once we come to the form, importantly, documents that you need to upload is, once you've completed this template, you need to upload it into the form that I'll share briefly. And please upload as a Word document, because for the final selected applicants, we might have to revisit aspects of your proposal. So it's easy for us to work with you to edit anything that needs editing or updating. That's why we say you should submit it or upload it as a Word document and not a PDF, because if you upload it as a PDF, of course, we can edit it, but then it becomes difficult for us to collaborate on the document that is a PDF. So please submit it back as a Word document. Another document you need to also upload while you're submitting your application is your CAC certificate. We need to be able to see that you're legally registered in Nigeria, because you're dealing with children, and we will take safeguarding very seriously. We don't want a situation whereby we're working with a partner and safeguarding is a problem because they are minors, right? How are they protected? And this is something selected applicants will get to learn before they even begin to implement the project. And we're going to have run sessions on safeguarding and other things that we need to be aware of, especially when we're working with children. So we need to ensure that you're legally registered in case of anything. We're not saying anything bad will happen, but we want organizations that, are legally registered. And audited financial accounts is key. If you have it, fine. So the last year's audited accounts, or maybe the one from 2023, if you have that, please attach it. If you don't, we've said that the last 3 months bank statements is fine to also attach and send, just so we see your inflow and outflow towards project expenses, right? Not towards buying a recharge card for yourself, which I don't think anybody on this call would do. But we saw that in the last phase, right? And that's why we're warning against personal bank account statement. You might be doing good, right? But do you have the system and structure in place to show accountability and transparency in how you're doing what you're doing, right? You might be small, but you can still be structured, even as a small organization. And I think Coal is very small. We don't have an annual budget of 50,000 USD, but we try to ensure that those systems and processes are very transparent. We have those structures in place. And if you don't, it's good that you begin to work towards those, because it will just prepare you faster, for bigger things. Evidence of previous work in education. So if you have like an annual report or a project reports that you've put together before that tells us a little bit more about your capacity in implementing the project, please, you can also attach that. It is optional, but if you have it, it's recommended that you also attach it, just so we see what you're doing. And importantly, a logic model. So this is something you need to clearly articulate in your monitoring and evaluation section, right? And we've put in this annex to simplify it. So when you go back and you're developing a logic model for your project, to think about how to go about it, right? So usually it will start with inputs, right? Inputs are basically resources. This can be financial or technical or human, right? So what resources do you need or inputs do you need to achieve this project? So you need to be able to articulate it in a logic model like this under your monitoring and evaluation section, right? So do you need, say for instance, you need coal funding, for instance. You need staff, you need training materials, you need volunteers. There are examples there. And I think the template is very self-explanatory in itself. And then you need to articulate what activities or actions you need to take. Again, this doesn't need to be detailed. You just need to be specific in the key activities that you implement. Are you doing phonic lessons, for instance? Are you going to train teachers, teacher training? Are you going to have a community stakeholder campaign or engagement? What are the specific activities that you implement? And you need to ensure that your inputs directly is linked or contributes to your activities, like to the next phase. And from your activities, you need to be able to clearly show that these activities, what are the expected outputs that will come out from these activities? So let's say, for instance, you do teacher training, right? In the output section, I want to know how many teachers do you intend to train? And I think that's something I need to say in your project description. Be clear with numbers. How many beneficiaries do you intend to reach under this project? Under your activities, let's say one of your activities, teacher training, how many teachers do you intend to train? How many public schools do you intend to reach, right? If you're doing those type of activities. So in your description, be as clear as possible with numbers, the figures, the detailed description of what you're trying to say. Otherwise, it will become very difficult for you to put together your logic model when you've not clearly articulated that in a way that makes sense to anybody who picks up your proposal to read. So please do take note of that. And it's expected that we are not just about numbers, right? Counting numbers. Yes, we're supporting 80 children or 200 children. That's fine, but that does not translate to impact, right? That does not translate to outcomes. So yes, you've done all of this teachers training. What is the expected outcome from the teacher training, for example? You want to be able to see an increase in knowledge or an increase in the utilization of the phonic lessons or the phonic skills that you've trained them in their own public schools with their children, right? That should translate to something beyond just the training that you've done. So you need to match all of your activities, outputs to outcomes. So outcomes can be short-term and long-term. And I know this is not a training, but when we onboard organizations, we'll have a detailed training on monitoring and evaluation, and so you have a better understanding of how these things work. But the example in the template should clearly help you articulate yours when you're putting together your proposal. And impact is always long-term, right? It's always something you're contributing to. So at the end of your project, what impact do you want to see, right? Like I said, enrolling children in school is not enough. Are they actually learning? Is learning being improved, right? Supporting 200 children in an after-school program is not enough. Those are just numbers. What does those numbers translate to? Is learning actually taking place? That's what we want to see at an outcome and at an impact level, and showing that you're able to track and demonstrate that is very important. And something that could help you track your impact or outcome are indicators, right? So for each objective, it is expected that you should have 1 or 2 indicators to help you track whether you're making progress or not. And what we've done in the template is that we've provided some standard education indicators. These are our cold standard indicators. Importantly, I've seen in the previous application, a grantee selected yes to all the indicators. One thing you need to understand with indicators is before you select an indicator, first of all, do you have the resources to collect data for that indicator, right? Beyond the resources, do you have the skill to analyze that data and report on that data? Which you should, because you're implementing a project. But think about those things, first of all, before you select an indicator. So these are just suggestive. They don't mean you have to select all of the indicators, but we expect that you select some standard indicators to track over time on your project. And there's an indicator definition there to help you understand what an indicator is. So for instance, the proportion of youth reporting improvements in their own well-being, for example, access to quality services, education, food security, or safety. Let's say that's an indicator you want to track on your project. You need to understand, what is this indicator all about, right? So we say measures the percentage of youth or young person or children who reports better access to quality services, education, food, blah, 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 and all of that. So the definition should be able to help you understand what that indicator is all about. So if you don't have the capacity to track that indicator, please don't include it. But if you do, all you need to do in this section is say yes or no, right? And move. Then the cumulative target by the end of the day, right? Let's say the proportion, let's say you've decided that you want to achieve 50%. That's the target you're setting for your project. So the cumulative target here should be by the end of the project. What is the percentage that you want to achieve, the percentage target that you want to achieve? So maybe it's 40% or 30%. You put that here. Then you need to tell us what will be the data source for this particular indicator that you're going to track. Are you going to track it at baseline, midline, and at end line? Are you going to track it from project reports? How will you track this? What's your data source for that indicator? So you need to clearly articulate it here. And importantly is, what's the frequency of reporting for this indicator? Is it something you're going to be tracking quarterly, monthly, weekly? What is the frequency? So you need to also clearly state it across the indicators that you select. For the ones that you select, just say yes. For the ones that you will not track, just say no. So we're clear on those ones. And then we've also left a column down here for your own custom indicators. Sometimes organizations might want to have their own indicators that they want to track. So if you have yours and you really want to track those indicators on this project, you can also follow the same, model and track those as we go. All right, I think that is the end of the template. I know it's a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully that has helped you, in terms of what the expectation is for each of those sections. So once you're done with the template, you just now need to come fill the form. The form is very easy and straightforward. It's just you picking something and just moving on, right? So it doesn't require you to do lots of writing. The main writing is in the proposal template. Here, we're just collecting basic information. And because part of this project is also a research, we just want to understand, one, the challenges of grassroots-led initiative, right? To be able to understand, especially around capacity, funding, your budget size and all, just to get a sense of what the challenges are, to know how we can better support in the future. So yeah, on the application form, we just want to know who is filling the form. So you can put in your name, your surname. Are you the founder? If yes, you just let us know yes, your gender, your age range, the email address of the person who is filling the form. And then here, we just want to get organizational information, the name of your organization, which we didn't collect in the proposal template because we want to collect that level of information here. Are you an NGO, CSO, CBO, nonprofit initiative, other kind of initiative? Just let us know. What is the primary sectors you work in, education, youth development, healthcare, whatever it is, just let us know, because we understand that it's possible that your organization is working across sectors, just like we are. We are not just working in education, we're also working in youth development and, social justice. So whatever sectors it is that you're working at, please just, state those here. Then briefly describe your organization's mission and vision. Of course, nobody knows your organization better than you, so you can briefly articulate that here. Your registered address, the website, if you have one, please put it there. You should at least have one social media handle that. If you don't have a website, we should be able to see what you do on social media. So you can include the links here. The year your organization was was established, the CAC registration number, even though, of course, we're going to collect this in your CAC document, but if you have it, just put it here. Your organizational email, this is the main email that is used for correspondence within your organization. The number of full-time employees in your organization, please just say it as it is. I'll tell you, in Cole, we only have one full-time employee, right? And then we have part-time staff and, intern and volunteers. You don't have to sugarcoat anything because we understand that your grassroots and maybe your organizational size is very small. Just say it as it is, right? Please. So how many full-time employees do you have? How many are part-times? How many of the volunteers? How many volunteers support your mission, right? Because again, we understand that citizen-led initiatives heavily rely on volunteers. So how many volunteers do you work with within your organization? Of your employees and volunteers, how many are young people? Again, we want to know whether you work with young people because we have a bias for young people. So how many young people work in your organization? And this in no way mean that, you'll be disqualified if you don't have many young people working in your organization. No, we just want to get a sense of, how many young persons you work with. Then your last annual operating budget, right? Is it less than 5,000 USD? Is it more? Whatever it is, you let us know. And then importantly, because like I did say, is a research also that we're trying to do to understand what the gaps are for grassroots initiative is, what are the top main sources of funding for your nonprofit initiative? Is it personal funds? Trust me, I put my funds into our initiative also. And I know a lot of grassroots organizations will do that, owned by founders who put their money. So what are the top three for you? Is it personal funds, individual donations? Whatever it is, just select and let us know. And then since you started operating as an initiative, how much estimated funding, both individual and donor funding, have you received locally? It's just an estimate again. If you've never received none, if you've received less than 5,000, just let us know. And since operating, this is locally, is the same question, but there's another question internationally. Have you received any type of individual and donor agency funding internationally? Just let us know. If you've never received any, again, since you've started, just put none. And then do you consider your organization different from the typical national NGOs? These are NGOs that are structured. They have big annual budgets. They have international donor partners. Do you see yourself as one? If you don't, then you say no. If you see yourself as that, then you can say yes. So if I go on to the next part, okay, it's not allowing me to do that. Let me just edit the form just so I can go through all the questions. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. So if you say no, right, it will bring you to answer all of these questions, right? And then you can rate it based off of, you know, how your organization is currently structured. And then we want to know what your project title is, the city or LGA where you'll be implementing this project. There's an example in parentheses here, just so you know what the expectation is. How long will you implement this project for? Is it 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, whatever it is? Other, just let us know. What is the total amount that you're requesting for from COAL? Provide a brief description of your primary targets, which again, if you've already filled your proposal template, it's just really copying and pasting into here. And then the number of direct beneficiaries you intend to support, how many do you intend to support, individuals, number of indirect beneficiaries. Again, there's an explanation of what direct and indirect mean. So you have that there. Is this a continuation of an existing project? Yes or no? If yes, how long have you been implementing the project? Is your organization a former recipient of COAL grant? Just let us know yes or no again. And then we come to the part where you have to now upload your proposal, your field proposal document, and any other supporting documents to the form. And then we have this question on whether if you're successful or not, would you be interested in participating in capacity building or in research activities? You are not it's not mandatory. You don't have to. So you just let us know, just because again, we want to respect your privacy and the data that you're sharing with us. Just let us know. And then at the end, you know, it's just a declaration there that everything you submitted is accurate, and then you submit the form. Yeah, it sounds very simple and easy, but the earlier you start, the better, right? And not wait until, you know, towards the end of the application deadline to do that. All right. I know it's been a long stretch, so I'm going to stop here, and then we can continue to answer any questions that people have. And I hope that was clear enough. And please feel free to ask any questions, please. Again.
Hi. Yes, thank you so much. This is insightful and helpful. I followed through. However, I will appreciate a recorded version of this. So I wanted to know whether it will be sent to us as well.
Yeah. We would usually upload, at the end of the day, upload the session on YouTube and share the link. So yeah, we'll have the recording available. Yes, Additional.
Okay, thank you once again. Really appreciate. I want to have a clear understanding with regards to two major issues. The first one is on monitoring and evaluation. So is it that there will be a team that would be in constant communication with the organization, or probably there would be more like a platform where on periodical basis reports would be communicated to COAL? That's one. And then two, I would also want to know with regards the indicators, or probably is it possible to make visualizations, probably to review percentages, or probably would you want to have names of beneficiaries, or because we don't know. Most times we take data of those where we have the names of the beneficiaries themselves, whom we know obviously were probably out of school, and due to the support received from an organization or something, had reinstated them to school, so to give formal and transparent reports. So we'd like to know, is it convenient or comfortable if the organization accepts we make this resource available, probably visualization, instead of having maybe a data entry that we can share probably? And in support to that, is it comfortable if maybe through the organization's mail, probably through the drive, we share the link? And most times periodic account of the activities we're doing is being viewed from that perspective, or probably from the website, something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think to your first question, yes. The reason why we didn't include all that detail is because it comes later for the organizations who were selected. We do take monitoring very seriously. So we would usually have a bi-weekly meeting with all the partners we work with. We have those check-in meetings, but beyond the check-in meetings, if you're selected, if your organization is selected, we have reporting templates that you would be required to report, which is also something that's captured in the contract that successful applicants will be signing. So it's not just that we give funding and go and sit down. No, we'll continue working with you. There's bi-weekly meetings. There's the reports that will be expected quarterly from respective organizations where you report on progress of your activities. Then indicators, visualization. Oh, I love visualization. So it was interesting to hear you say that. But it's not just being able to, for you to be able to first of all visualize the data, you need to first of all collect it, right? So if you have that skill set, as much as possible, if you know, it's always good to visualize data that you collect. So if you have that capacity, yes, please include that in your reports, because we want to see those kind of things. But in terms of, I think there was something you said about like a drive and all that will come later. Once, you know, if you're successful, all that details of how to report and, you know, progress on your project, all of that will come later. And then I think you asked a question on the indicators that I'm trying to remember now. Or have I answered all your questions? If I have
Yeah,
not,
so basically what I just want to have an idea is that, is it something that if there is no provisions for maybe some persons not comfortable having their names written or and stuff like that, is it still fine by code? And because sometimes some persons might have a kind of they might not really be comfortable with it. So, but we might have an idea, okay, this is the situation and this is what it is. So that's why I want to find out if it is fine.
So first of all, if you're directly, one of the things, the first thing that you will even ask for once you start is a database of the beneficiaries you're supporting. And the reason why we collect that is for evaluation purposes and for monitoring purposes too, because sometimes we might routinely call either a parent of the child, because we collect that data, not just the list of the children, but also the details of their parents and their guardians, because you're working with children, right? And sometimes we'll routinely call just to check on the parents and see how they're doing, to check in if the child is actually learning or if the child is going to the center and all. So we'll require a database of direct beneficiaries. But let's say, for instance, you're doing an activity and someone comes to your activity and does not want to write their names in their attendance sheet, for instance. You have to respect data privacy, right? Of course, that is totally fine. But not with your direct beneficiaries, because you need to have that data because you're supporting them. Especially because you're even working with children. You need to know who the parents are. You need to have their phone numbers, their contact details, right, in your database. But if it's an activity and someone comes and doesn't want to put down their name, that's totally fine. You need to respect their data and their privacy. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well answered. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Great. Any more questions? I see some in the chat. So Dr. Roslyn is asking, is the project 6 months, July to December? So it's 6. It depends on what you're proposing. It can be 6 months, but we'll advise that you make it a 12-month project, right? But if you see in the application form, there's an option for a 6 month project. Is that what you're proposing? or are you proposing for a 12-month project? So I think it's entirely up to you, but it shouldn't be more than 12 months. And it shouldn't be less than 6 months. So I hope that that helps answer that question. Then Saint Gyang says, organizations with a similar interest, can they merge to apply? Yes, we welcome consortium. Feel free to do that. If you have an organization that you want to work with, you can put together an application and apply as a consortium. You just need to let us know in your application that this is a consortium and make it clear who the actual partners are. And then, okay, I think that is it. Any more questions, please, from anyone? Or are we all clear and good? And our email is always there. If you have any further questions or areas you need clarification on, please do shoot us an email and we'll do well to respond to your questions. But I think as we wrap up, it's just to really emphasize that, like Shegun kept saying, we are not saviors. We're really looking for partners to work with, right? And because like you, we understand the context where we work. And like you, we're really looking for partners and collaborators. It's not a handout, right? It's how do we come together as citizen aid actors, as partners working in this field to really contribute to our communities and societies. That's how I want us to think through this. And I do hope that we've been able to make that clear, that we have the power and we have everything it takes to solve our own problems and not always have to wait for, external support. That is good, but it shouldn't be that we're depending on that to solve our problem. Because like I said, the nations that we look up to today, right, are people who paid the price to build those countries and build their nations. That's why they are where they are today. And education is critical, and everybody needs to just put their hands, on deck to ensure that we're bridging whatever inequality gaps that we have there. As we've seen, we can't really rely on our government, right? So it therefore means that every citizen then needs to do something, because again, those are the children and the future, like they say, of tomorrow. It's just ensuring that we're contributing our quota in any way that we can to make learning improved and secure a better future for Nigeria. So yeah, I will wrap up there, except if there's anything else from anyone. But otherwise, really appreciate your time and thanks for joining us today.